Yeah, for sure.
If it's dog food, it will be the best integration. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to our session titled Beyond Metrics Modernization at Fleetio. My name is Jeff. I'm the Director of Data and Analytics.
I'm Jonathan. I'm a Senior Data Engineer at Fleetio.
And today, we'd like to talk to you about the last 2 years of our metrics modernization journey. So I think throughout Coalesce, the last couple of days, there's a lot of talk about semantic layers, metrics, BIs that plug into that. What we'd like to do is walk you through our journey, what we went through, kind of lay out a little bit of the motivation and context, and talk about what we built to kind of solve our purposes. And hopefully you guys can take away something from this talk, whether it be ideas or just some inspiration. I'll start off with a quick introduction to Fleetio, talk a little bit about the context, and then pass it over to Jonathan to give you guys a detailed look into the tool and talk about some of the demos and then what's coming and whatnot. So with that, Fleetio is a B2B software as a service company focusing on the fleet management space. So if you got one vehicle or a couple of vehicles or tens of thousands of vehicles, we help you manage the maintenance, the issues, and inspections. And really, it's a vertical SaaS business that has traditionally been very pen and paper and sort of spreadsheet heavy, and we're trying to digitize that. And so we were launched in 2012, and over time, we kind of added a lot of different products, kind of serve different verticals within fleet management. And with that, we've had to implement and track a lot of metrics to go along with it, to go along with our growth. And so, like I mentioned before, we're a B2B SaaS company, and we generally care a lot about the same metrics that a lot of other B2B SaaS companies care about, things like ARR, MRR, NRR, LTV, CAC, things like that. There might be some slight nuances to our industry, but by and large, it's the same set of metrics. And so, like any good startup, we started off with a minimum viable product, right? So how do we start off capturing these metrics? And the answer is a spreadsheet. And you guys can take a look here. We got some of the metrics on the rows and then time on the columns. And that works. We just fill it out, and now we can track our business. As the company grew and we added different departments, added different business units, we decided we now need to track departmental metrics. So what do? We added tabs. Very revolutionary, right? And now, each department can kind of run their own separate departments with the metrics that they care about. For example, marketing would care about MQLs and things like that, and we track that in tabs. Now, you may be looking at this and thinking, okay, I know exactly where this is going. This is not going to end well, right? And you'd probably be right looking back at it today. But what I would say is, for the first 8 or 9 years of the company's existence, this solution was perfectly fine. And it worked pretty well. And in fact, it's not just us. dbt actually agrees with us. This is a blog from dbt back in 2017, which is feels like a stone age. But a lot of the core principles from this blog actually still applies. I think my main takeaway, as I was rereading this blog a week or so ago, is that when you're starting a company, finding product market fit is more important, and you really shouldn't overbuild your data platform or overbuild any sort of complex BI metrics until you kind of get that product market fit, right? And so that's what we did. We just used a spreadsheet. We kind of hummed along for quite a while. But then it came to a point as the company kept on growing and growing, we hit what's colloquially known as the growth stage of a company, right? And what does dbt say about growth stages? It's all about creating analytical processes that scale. And our spreadsheet did not scale. So until we hit this stage, we were completely fine with that spreadsheet. But when we hit this stage, we started to experience a lot of pains. And let me walk you through what pains we experienced. Back to the spreadsheet. All right, so we're going to enter stuff into the spreadsheet, right? We're going to fill this out. And sometimes you would fill it out by hand if it's a new metric or whatnot. If you were lucky, someone a little bit more technical hooked up another Google Sheet or another report to this spreadsheet so that data would automatically load in. If we wanted to know what the definition of a metric is, for example, new trials, we just use the comments. And it becomes a big deal if we wanted to change the definition of a metric, right? That becomes generally a very big pain. And that's not all. What really happened is that we ended up hitting the limit of the spreadsheet, right? So here you can see about 2 years ago, this whole thing stopped working, right? And Tony, who's our founder, kind of said, well, we knew this day was coming. We hit the cell limit in Google Sheets, and it's not going to work. And that day is today. So at this point, we're like, okay, this is not going to work. What do we need to do to actually get ourselves onto better footing, onto something that's sustainable for our growth phase? Well, at the same time, we were implementing the great modern data stack, right? I think all of us are here because we want to learn more about this, and we've experienced kind of the benefits that this stack will give us. And can we do the same thing for metrics? You know, that was the question we asked ourselves. Can we do something that approximates the modern data stack with metrics as well? And it just so happens that dbt, about 2 years ago, in a keynote, released the dbt-metrics system, and a couple months later followed up with the first package of dbt-metrics. And we're like, great. You know, the folks that solved the transformations are going to solve metrics for us as well. You know, always good. Turns out that really wasn't quite the case. And at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Jonathan to talk about like what happened with that, why there were certain gaps in the dbt-metrics 2 years ago, and what our journey has been since then. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Thanks. So the spreadsheet is out at this point. We know that this doesn't scale. It's not going to work for us. But how are we actually going to solve what the spreadsheet was doing, which was providing an interface for all of our business users to look at metrics over time? So we have several options. We're already in the middle of implementing the modern data stack. We can build models in dbt, which we're already doing. We can build dashboards in our BI tool. We can buy a new tool that supports sort of a semantic layer. At this point, you have to kind of put yourself back in late 2021, early 2022. Adoption of the dbt semantic layer within BI tools is much different than it is today. Or we could just build something on our own and really tailor it to the experience that our users are used to. But really what we have to think about is like, what problems are we actually trying to solve? We're not just trying to replace a spreadsheet, of course. So we want to sort of go back to our first principles about like, what does this tool actually do? So the first thing we want to do is answer the most common questions. We know that people are asking questions of metrics. They're doing weekly and monthly and quarterly business reviews. They want to understand what's going on about these core business metrics. This is really like standard dashboard functionality. Our spreadsheet was much too tabular. We wanted to be able to visualize trends. So nothing really revolutionary here. So from like a scoreboard perspective, any tool could do this. BI, new semantic layer tool, we could build something on our own to do this. This is sort of table stakes for what we're doing with visualization. We also wanted to simplify defining metrics. So it was very difficult to evolve our metric definitions over time in a spreadsheet, of course. So we are bought into the semantic layer at this point. Now keep in mind, we're talking a dbt-metrics spec, sort of V1, within our dbt project. We're thinking that we want those definitely to be version controls, and we want them to be essentially semantic layer, as you would expect. So our BI tool could not interface with the semantic layer at the time. So it would have been very difficult for us to do that. We used a tool internally that was really picked for self-service analytics and works really well for that, but it just didn't have this feature for us. So we could buy a new tool that supports that, or we could build our own. Our internal BI tool? Yeah, our internal BI tool is Metabase. Yep. We also use Hex today as well, as you remember from sort of our data architecture diagram. Another thing we wanted to do was consolidate our metrics. That spreadsheet had evolved to where we really considered as a business every slice of a metric that we cared about as its own metric, which is not really the case. Those are just slices and filtered versions of the same metric, and we really want to consolidate those definitions. This is a core semantic layer problem to solve. So once again, we could buy a new tool that does this, or we could build our own. We also really wanted to standardize visualization. So one of our core goals was we want to define metrics alongside our models, but we don't really want to have to build dashboards on top of that. We want the dashboard to be built for us based on the configuration. And we have a series of time series metrics that we care about. So what was this metric 6 periods ago? What was it? What's the 3-period moving average? Things like that, year over year. We want to slice that by time grains, of course, all the things you would expect to do. This is, once again, a core semantic layer feature that we want to implement. So in this case, we really couldn't find a new tool that did this in the way we wanted to, that gave us all of these standard time series comparisons over time. So that's a point for building our own. We also want to put metrics in context. We had those comments in the spreadsheet so people could see, what does this mean? We really want to surface our metadata about those metrics, which is a human-readable business definition of a metric alongside that, not only in the configuration that the data team uses, but also out to our end users. We want them to see that right alongside the visualizations. This is, once again, something you can accommodate within the dbt-metrics spec at that time. You can add custom metadata, so that definitely was a good solution for us. Once again, we couldn't really find a tool that surfaced that in the way we wanted to, is in a streamlined way that our users expected. So what does that end with? Building our own. By a narrow margin, we decided that building our own is the right tool. Now, the reason we decided this is we as a data team do not want to maintain an entire web application start to finish on our own. That is not something that sounds very appealing to us. Nobody wants to have to watch me write front-end code, all of that sort of stuff. So the good thing is we knew that there was tools out there that helped us solve this. So we picked Streamlit. Streamlit is a tool that allows you to write data apps in pure Python, so no JavaScript for me. It has pre-built components for the things that we care about, which are things like controls, tabular data, charting, all of that sort of stuff that we don't want to have to build on our own. It fit well into our development workflow. We could plug it right into our process as a team. It also has a great community. So they have some options to deploy it on the Streamlit Community Cloud. There's lots of components that are community built. It's fully open source, and so it really fit well with what we wanted to do. So now we had to decide sort of what's our journey in defining our metrics. And we started with our own spec that was basically the dbt-metrics spec v1 at the time. Now we did a couple things. We allowed ourselves to define metrics as raw SQL. So we pointed at a model, we could write raw SQL for that. That gave us a ton of flexibility to do complex metrics in a system that made sense to us. We also did, at the time, separate our filters and dimensions. Over time, we sort of merged those back together, but that made sense to us originally. And this was really designed to work with our own SQL generator, which lives inside that Streamlit app that uses Jinja, which you may be familiar with from using dbt, to template the SQL and ultimately send that to Snowflake in our data stack. Now, over time, as dbt's metrics evolved, we started using the dbt-metrics spec to leverage all of the benefits of that. And so we could now define those metrics in our dbt repo. We're dbt cloud users, so we could use the dbt metadata API to pull in those definitions, ultimately still generate the SQL and get those results back from Snowflake. So this is sort of the second step in our journey. And now we're working on metric flow. So metric flow is going to allow us to take advantage of semantic models and measures. It's going to support joins, of course. So all of the benefits of using that are baked into what we're doing here. So we really want to be able to support all of these specifications within our tool, which we find is really valuable for us. That means that we're not stuck with any limitations of any specification. We can evolve that specification on our own terms. When we have business requirements that have really complex metrics, we can choose where we want to define them, but still have them centralized in the same place. So with that, I'm going to actually walk you through the Streamlit tool and show you what we built. So the first thing I will say is we do have the option to use sample data here. So I'm going to walk you through this. We can use DuckDB locally. We can load some sample data in there, and that's how I'm going to do that here. It's super simple. We have a data class here within our repo. We simply run a quick command to generate that data. It's going to generate 2 data sets for us. The first is a opportunities data set. So if you're familiar with Salesforce data, other CRM data, you'll be very familiar with this. The second is just a calendar table. In our production instance, of course, we're using dbt to generate that. And then once we have generated that sample data in DuckDB locally, we can just run our Streamlit app. So if you're familiar with Streamlit, that's as simple as running a Streamlit run and then the entry point of your project, which will then spin up your Streamlit app locally. So we will do that now, and we will be up and running on our localhost instance. So in just a moment, we'll be up and running here. And there we go. And now we're up and running on our local instance of Streamlit. So effectively, there are three main areas within this for us today. We have a home dashboard, which allows us to do a few different things. First, we have a series of helpful links on the side so we can point to other parts of our data stack. It's sort of a data portal for us. We have a set of key metrics, which we'll talk about in a little more detail in a second. And then we have this how to use the metric explorer, which just gives us our users a little bit of guidance on how to actually use the tool. Now, we have these mini metrics is the first thing I want to focus on, which are just these small visualizations. This gives us some density within that data so we can see a bunch of metrics on the same time grains and compare those. So we will go ahead and take a look at how this works. So you can see we have a series of metrics here that we've defined. We can define what the key metrics are as configuration, as YAML within the project. It gives you just a quick chart. You can adjust the time grain of these as well as the time period and whether or not you want to show incomplete or complete periods. Our goal with this was really for these to be fairly limited in what they're presenting, just the smallest amount of information. So you can see here, you can access some metadata about that metric here, but we're not overwhelming you with that data. You can change the time grain. We can switch to week. We can switch to quarter. We can adjust how far back we want to look, if we want to look back a couple years and see all of that in one place. But really, this is just a landing page to direct you to explore those metrics more deeply. So we will walk through that, which is really the heart of this tool in just a moment. So the next thing we have are data domain pages, which are effectively just the same home dashboard, but for a specific business domain. So here we have some sample data. You can imagine in your organization, you might have one for marketing, one for finance, one for product, so on and so forth. So we have same key metrics here. You have the same controls at the top, but then we also list out all the metrics that are available in that domain with a quick definition of what they are to make it easy to explore them. Now we're going to go to really the heart of our solution, which is the metrics explorer itself. So this is where you can really dive into the metrics and see sort of the business problems we were trying to solve. So the first thing you will see here is that we have a bunch of controls on the left-hand side. So you can see the metric category. Here we just have one, but you can select from multiple there. You can then select from all of the metrics that are defined in that particular category. So here we can switch to win rate. We can now change the time grain. We can change how many periods back we're looking. We also have some granular controls, so if you really want to dial in that time period, you can do that as well. And then towards the bottom, we have the ability to slice a metric and visualize that, as well as the ability to filter. Now, this is all dynamically controlled by the definition of the metric. So the dimensions that are defined is what creates all of this UI. So next, we will talk about the metadata. So I mentioned before that we wanted to surface that business information as well as the technical definition. So you can see here we have a business description as well as a technical definition of that metric. We also have ownership information of the person that owns those metrics, so you know immediately who to go to whenever you land on this page. So that was really important to us to be able to see that information front and center. Now, this is really the heart of what we wanted to achieve, which is the ability to explore a metric. And so I'm going to walk through an example here of how you can do that. We are sitting here looking at the slice by section. So as we talked about before, you can choose the dimensions that you want to slice by. So in this case, we're looking at market segment. We can control that. There's obviously some other dimensions we've defined in this sample data set. But you can see from this visualization, we have both a line chart and a bar chart. And then you can decide if you want to drill into something. So if, as an example, I am only interested in the mid-market segment in this particular area, I can quickly change the context of everything I'm looking at to utilize our slicing feature and change everything about what we're doing. So if we go back up to the top of this page, we can see that we now are filtered for only mid-market. We can now slice by industry, as an example, perhaps look at a particular industry that we're interested in, add that as a filter, and now we're just creating custom metrics on the fly. We do have the ability to download this data. You can see the context has changed at the top. We have all of these standard time series metrics that we care about being recalculated based on those filters without having to go and custom make this all the time. So basically, end users can create whatever slice or filter of a metric that they care about without us having to do anything but define those as dimensions within that metric. So with that, how can you try out the Metrics Explorer? We are going to be open sourcing this project so it can be used by everybody. So we're going to be doing that in the next few days. You can check out the Fleetio GitHub for that repo. And it's as simple as what I just walked through. You can clone the repo. You can get started with DuckDB, so you don't even have to bring your cloud data warehouse to this project. But if you would like to, you can configure those connections, connect to your cloud data warehouse and dbt cloud, and then you can start exploring your own metrics today. So what's on our roadmap? Complete support for metric flow and the dbt semantic layer APIs. That's going to allow us to offload a lot of complex SQL generation and things like that to dbt cloud. We will still continue to support that SQL generation internally. So if you're not a dbt cloud user, you want to evolve your own metric spec, you can definitely continue to use this project for that. We do want to integrate more data dictionary, lineage, and data discovery. We use Select Star. We would love to use Select Star's APIs to bring that information into these metrics and explore all sorts of different aspects that are related to the data sets that power those metrics. We do also want to add metric benchmarking and goal tracking. So there's internal goals, of course, that we set for metrics, and we want to track our attainment towards those goals, but also adding third-party data sets, whether those are from VC firms or other research that we can find to say, for example, what is a good net revenue retention rate for my industry, and compare that to the metrics that I'm calculating here. And the last thing I would say is we're thinking about automating our basic analysis. It's not particularly hard to, once you know all the dimensions and the calculation of a metric, to understand really what's driving changes there. And those are often the most common questions that are being asked, which is, this metric is up, this metric is down, why is it up or down? And we feel that we can automate a lot of that basic analysis and give our end users the ability to see these are the dimensions that are contributing in a statistically significant way to this metric changing over time. So what are some of our learnings here? One thing we learned is that you can get pretty far with a rudimentary solution. That's true of our spreadsheet, and that's also true of other tools like this tool, which is doing pretty standard time series visualization of our metrics. This really answers a lot of questions for the business, and so you can get really far with that. We also found that it was really important to be able to develop against our metrics in the semantic layer locally and understand what was happening with them. So define a metric in our project, be able to spin up this UI quickly in a local development environment and see what those metrics look like. And we also really, as we went through this process, realized that this could really be a data portal for us. And the question became, should this metric semantic layer really be kind of the front door to self-service? And we think the answer to that is yes. We think a lot of our users are starting with metrics and then drilling from there, and we want to support that journey. We think it really makes our data very discoverable, and people can drill from high-level aggregation down into the most granular details of those metrics. So I will say we're hiring. If you're interested in data products, we are hiring a few roles on our product management team right now, in particular, to focus on reporting and analytics. So I would encourage you to go to fleetio.com/careers. And with that, we will leave a few minutes for questions. Yes.
First of all, thanks for a really inspiring talk. Really great to see this bootstrapping evolution. I was wondering if you can expand maybe a little bit on how this integrates with your data warehouse, so with Snowflake, especially when it comes to, let's say, IAM governance, maybe costs of, like, is it directly querying Snowflake?
Yeah, so I'll repeat the question so everybody can hear them on the live stream as well. So the question was really, how does this integrate with Snowflake in our data warehouse being Snowflake? And so the answer is yes, it is querying Snowflake directly. So it's doing SQL generation and sending that to Snowflake. There are a couple things to keep in mind. Streamlit does have some caching built into it, which is nice, and does change things. The DuckDB sample data runs blazingly fast, as you might imagine, as well. So that's certainly an option as well. But we are leveraging our cloud warehouse directly like any BI tool would effectively. Yeah. Yes?
Could you elaborate a little bit more on the use cases for stakeholders that might use your Streamlit application versus, say, a hex dashboard that you have in your environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was to expand on what are the use cases where somebody would use this instead of perhaps like hex within our organization, because we have both of those tools. So I would say a couple things. This really has like lots of standard visualizations built for you. So as we think about those weekly, quarterly, monthly business reviews, this has a standard set of visualizations that's digestible across the business. So if you work in marketing and you're looking at a metric from another area, like customer support, you're still very used to that, so it's very standardized. And so that has been really the main use case, I would say. We traditionally use Hex for more in-depth data analysis, data science work, and less for more like BI use cases, and do also rely on Metabase. So we kind of see this, like I said, as like a front door where you would probably start here, look at some standard visualizations that we have all sort of agreed on, and then from there drill into perhaps maybe a more detailed Hex app or a more detailed Metabase dashboard that has more visualizations. Yeah.
I will say that also because there's definition and context and point of contact inside this app, this is more about like the configure. These are the ones that leadership cares about. And if you want to do ad hoc analysis or you want to like drill like a level deeper, we don't want to put every single thing that you can see in here. We only want like the subset that's really important for driving the business forward. Yeah.
Yes.
What was the change management journey like for this to implement in the business? But then also, what does the sustainment plan look like? Does it require a lot of resources? For instance, new metrics coming up. What is the process like? How does it go?
Yeah, well, I think everybody was pretty fed up with the spreadsheet. So like we were all looking for a different alternative. So you know, the slides showed that it just stopped working, right? And so change management, I think we were lucky in the fact that people were ready for a change. So people were receptive to something else. And definitely, like if there is new things that we need to add to the metrics explorer all the time, and that goes through our standard sort of intake flow, data requests, and that kind of thing.
Now, I will say one interesting bit to think about is we did try to meet some of our sort of users partway to where they were from like a spreadsheet. So there was so much density of information within that spreadsheet, you know, all these metrics just stacked on top of each other. So there was downsides to that. Of course, we couldn't see the trends very well, but you could see a lot of metrics in one view. And in many ways, sort of the mini metrics where you can sort of change the context of all the metrics at once was inspired by that. So I think it's always important to sort of meet your users where they are and sort of like lead them towards what you think is really a better solution for some of those things. But yeah, we definitely you know, considered sort of the status quo as well while building the solution.
Thanks for the talk. Knowing that there's probably half a dozen relatively inexpensive commercial solutions available today that pretty much do all of that and maybe some more, would you build again or would you not?
I would definitely build again. And I think the main reason that we have found this to be valuable is that these metrics are very vital to our business. They're a crucial part of what we're doing. And I think it was not an incredible engineering lift to build this in a tool like Streamlit. And it gives us complete sort of creative control to build a data portal that integrates additional features like bringing in lineage information bringing in additional sort of like data portal features, we will probably expand this tool to include other views. And we feel like it's a really great platform for us to build a front door that can then lead into other tools.
It's also just very customized for our specific use case. So like, there's like dozens of vendors out there and tools out there that can do something very similar, but you end up having to compromise on certain things. And this is the one tool where, we built it to our own needs in our own spec. Yeah, but I think it definitely, like if we were to start this whole process today, we would definitely evaluate all those new tools that are out there on the market before making a decision to say build our own. But we found a lot of value in doing so.
Now, where do you guys host your Streamlit app?
So we, right now, we do use Streamlit Cloud for our main Streamlit hosting. We are looking at some other options. Obviously, Streamlit is being in the process of potentially being able to host it inside of Snowflake, which is an interesting concept to us. We also do maintain our own Kubernetes cluster. That's an option for us to deploy there as well. But since we only have a single Streamlit app at this point, the Streamlit Cloud works well for us.
I imagine what we've seen on the screen isn't like V1. Can you talk a little bit about how many iterations you go through leadership to get to that final state?
Yeah. So the first version was really sort of just the metrics explorer. That was really the core functionality we were building, which is I want to be able to select a metric from a dropdown, change the time grain, add some slicing and filtering. That was really the core first piece that we built. Now, over time, as we started sort of shopping that around to our users, we were collecting that feedback, like I mentioned before. I really like seeing lots of metrics on one view, and so we sort of introduced the data domain page. We introduced that home dashboard. We're obviously going to be introducing more features over time, but definitely started with a very core use case of just sort of semantic layer. I just want to see a metric. I want to slice and filter it, and that was sort of V1 for us.
Cool. Well, I think with that, thank you all again for coming. Appreciate the time.